My name is Peggy, and I am 68 years old. I live alone in a small town in Vermont, in the house my late husband, Harold, built with his own two hands. 3 years ago, I lost Harold to a sudden heart attack. Since then, my son Derek has been my only family, my pride, my reason to keep going. I thought I knew him. I thought blood meant loyalty. But one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, a voice message sent by mistake tore apart everything I believed in. The voice I trusted most carried the cruelest words I have ever heard. Before I share my story with you, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If you believe in the power of family love, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want to see how I turned this heartbreak into my greatest victory, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Now let me take you back to where it all began. My story truly begins with Harold. We met back in 1978 at a fall festival in Burlington. He was a carpenter, strong hands, gentle heart, and a smile that could light up the darkest room. I was a young nurse fresh out of training with dreams bigger than my small town roots. We fell in love over apple cider and dancing under string lights. Within a year, we were married. Harold spent the next 5 years building our home on a 5-acre piece of land just outside town. Every beam, every nail, every floorboard was placed by his hands. He would come home covered in sawdust, exhausted but happy, and tell me about the progress. When he finally carried me through that front door, I cried. Not because the house was perfect, but because it was ours, built from love and sweat and dreams. I worked at the local hospital for 35 years, night shifts, double shifts, holidays, weekends. I loved my patients, but I loved coming home even more. Harold eventually opened his own woodworking shop, and we built a comfortable life together. Nothing fancy, nothing extravagant, just honest work and honest love. We wanted children desperately. After 3 miscarriages that nearly broke me, Derek came along in 1982. He was our miracle, our only child, the answer to every prayer I had whispered in those dark hospital nights. From the moment I held him, I knew I would give him everything, and I did. I remember teaching Derek to ride his bicycle on the gravel road in front of our house. Harold would take him fishing every Saturday morning, and they would come back with stories bigger than any fish they caught. When Derek got sick with pneumonia at age 7, I stayed awake for 4 nights straight watching his chest rise and fall, bargaining with God for his recovery. When Derek wanted to go to college, Harold and I did not hesitate. We sold our old pickup truck, the one Harold had driven for 15 years, to help pay his tuition. Derek graduated with a degree in finance and got a good job in Boston. We were so proud. Our boy had made it. Then Harold died. 3 years ago, on a cold February morning, his heart just stopped. One moment he was drinking coffee at the kitchen table, the next, he was gone. I held his hand until the paramedics arrived, but I already knew. The warmth had left him. Harold left me well provided for. Our house now worth around $450,000, our savings account with about $300,000, and his life insurance policy another $200,000. Nearly $1 million in total. But I would have traded every penny to have him back. I never flaunted our money. I kept living simply wearing the same clothes, driving the same old car. I figured everything would go to Derek eventually. He was my only child, my only heir. What else would I do with it? Over the years, I gave Derek and his wife Brittany everything they asked for. I paid for their entire wedding, $50,000 for a ceremony I thought was too expensive, but kept my mouth shut about. I gave them $80,000 for the down payment on their house. I bought Brittany a new car, $35,000, because she said her old one was not safe. Every birthday, every Christmas, every anniversary, I sent them checks for $5,000. I never asked for anything in return. I just wanted to be part of their lives. I wanted Sunday dinners and holiday visits and phone calls that lasted longer than 5 minutes. I thought that was what family meant. I thought my generosity was building bridges. I did not realize I was just filling their pockets. About 6 months before that fateful voice message, something started to shift. Derek and Brittany began visiting more often. Instead of once a year, they started coming once a month. At first, I was thrilled. I cleaned the house from top to bottom before each visit, cooked Derek's favorite meals, baked pies from scratch. But something felt off. Their visits seemed forced somehow, like they were checking boxes rather than enjoying time together. Brittany would sit on my couch with her phone in her hand, barely looking up. Derek would glance at his watch every few minutes. The conversations felt hollow. Then the questions started. Strange questions that made me uncomfortable but that I brushed aside because I trusted them. Brittany asked me one afternoon, her voice dripping with fake concern, if I was seeing my doctor regularly. I told her I was healthy as a horse, just some minor aches and pains that come with age. She pressed further, asking about my heart, my blood pressure, my medications. I laughed it off, saying I was tougher than I looked. Derek joined in. He wanted to know what pills I was taking, how often I saw specialists, whether I had considered getting a full checkup. He suggested I should see a cardiologist just to be safe since heart problems run in families. I reminded him that his father's heart attack was sudden and unexpected, not hereditary. But he kept pushing. One evening during one of their visits, Derek brought up my will. He asked if I had one, if it was updated, if everything was in order. Brittany chimed in immediately, saying it was important to have these things sorted out to avoid complications later. Her exact words were, to avoid complications. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I ignored it. These were my children. They loved me. They were just being practical. I told them about my assets, the house, the savings, the insurance. Derek nodded along his eyes, calculating in a way that I refused to acknowledge at the time. Brittany smiled, that thin-lipped smile that never quite reached her eyes. A few weeks later, Brittany sent me a brochure for a retirement community in Florida. Sunny Pines, it was called, with pictures of smiling elderly people playing shuffleboard and doing water aerobics. She said she was worried about me living alone, that I needed to be somewhere with round-the-clock care. I told her no. I told her I was perfectly capable of taking care of myself. I told her I wanted to die in the house Harold built, not in some sterile facility surrounded by strangers. I saw the flash of disappointment cross her face. It was quick, barely a second, but I saw it. She recovered quickly, patting my hand and saying she just wanted what was best for me. Derek started suggesting I should sell the house. It was too big for one person, he said. Too much maintenance, too many stairs. I could take the money and use it for my retirement, he said. Make my golden years comfortable. What he really meant was that I could take the money and give it to him. I started having trouble sleeping. I would lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, replaying our conversations in my head. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, the same bones that had carried me through 68 years of life. But I pushed those feelings down. I told myself I was being paranoid, being ungrateful for their attention. I convinced myself that my son loved me. I had to believe it, because if I did not, then what had my entire life been for? The day that changed everything was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were always quiet days for me. I would sit on the porch in the afternoon, drink my tea, and watch the leaves fall. It was early October, and the maples were blazing with color, red, orange, gold. Harold used to say that Vermont autumns were God's way of apologizing for winter. I was sitting in my usual spot, wrapped in the quilt Harold's mother had made for our wedding, when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with Derek's name, and my heart lifted. He was calling. Or so I thought. It was a voice message. I tapped play, expecting to hear my son's voice asking how I was doing, maybe telling me about his week. What I heard instead destroyed me. Derek's voice filled my ears, but he was not talking to me. He was talking to Brittany. He had sent the message to me by mistake, meant for his wife instead. The words came at me like bullets. He said he could not stand this useless old hag anymore. Those were his exact words. Useless old hag. He said every time he had to drive 3 hours to this backwater Vermont town, he wanted to scream. He complained about the wasted weekends, the boring conversations, the pretending to care. Then his voice dropped lower, almost conspiratorial. He said it would not be long now. Soon she would be taking her final nap, he said, and then everything would be theirs. He had already calculated it. Sell the house, take the savings, cash in the insurance. Nearly $1 million. They could spend it all in Paris, live like royalty, never worry about money again. I heard Brittany laugh in the background, that high-pitched, cruel laugh that haunted my dreams for weeks afterward. She said she could not wait that every time she had to pretend to care about the old woman she wanted to vomit. The message ended. 2 minutes and 37 seconds of my son planning his inheritance while I was still breathing. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I played the message again, praying I had misheard, praying it was some kind of joke. But every word was crystal clear. Every syllable was a knife. I sat there for hours, unmoving as the sun set and the porch grew dark. The tea in my cup went cold. The quilt slipped from my shoulders. I did not notice. I thought about Derek as a baby, how he would wrap his tiny fingers around mine. I thought about Derek as a boy running through the yard laughing at nothing. I thought about Derek as a young man hugging me at his college graduation, telling me he could not have done it without me. Where had that boy gone? When had he become this monster? I cried that night. I cried harder than I had when Harold died, because losing your husband is natural, expected part of the cycle of life. But losing your child to greed, to cruelty, to betrayal, that is a different kind of death. That is the death of everything you believed in. I did not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the photographs on my wall. Derek, at every age, smiling, innocent, loved. I had given him everything, and he was waiting for me to die so he could cash in. As dawn broke through my window painting, the room in pale pink light, something shifted inside me. The tears dried up. The sorrow hardened into something else, something stronger. Harold's voice echoed in my memory as clear as if he were standing beside me. Be strong, Peggy. You are stronger than you know. I was not going to lie down and accept this. I was not going to be a victim. I was going to find out exactly what my son was planning, and then I was going to make sure it never happened. I needed to know the full extent of their scheme before I acted. Confronting Derek immediately would only give him a chance to cover his tracks, to spin lies, to manipulate me like he had been doing for months. So I decided to investigate. My first call was to Mr. Thompson, Harold's lawyer and a family friend for over 3 decades. He had helped us write our wills, handled the paperwork when Harold passed, and always treated me with respect and kindness. I asked him, trying to keep my voice steady, if anyone had contacted his office asking about my estate. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Thompson told me that Derek had called about 2 months ago. He had asked detailed questions about my will, about who the beneficiaries were, about how the inheritance process worked. But the question that made Mr. Thompson most uncomfortable was this. Derek had asked what would happen if his mother was declared mentally incompetent. Who would manage her assets then? My blood ran cold. My own son was not just waiting for me to die. He was exploring ways to take control while I was still alive. I thanked Mr. Thompson and hung up. Then I sat very still for a very long time. My next call was to Sunny Pines, the retirement community Brittany had been so eager to promote. I pretended to be a potential customer, an elderly woman looking into options for herself. The receptionist was friendly and chatty, happy to answer my questions. I asked if anyone had inquired about me specifically. She checked her records and said yes, a woman named Brittany had called several weeks ago. Brittany had asked about the process for admitting elderly relatives. She had asked if it was possible to admit someone without their full consent. She had asked about guardianship procedures. I felt sick to my stomach. They were not just planning to inherit my money, they were planning to lock me away in a facility against my will, strip me of my autonomy, and wait for me to die alone and confused. I remembered that Derek had used my computer during one of his visits. He had asked to check his email, and I had thought nothing of it. Now, I wondered what else he might have done. I opened my browser and checked the history. What I found made my hands tremble. Derek had searched for how to have an elderly parent declared incompetent. He had searched for inheritance rights while parents are still alive. He had searched for cheapest nursing homes in Vermont. The evidence was overwhelming. This was not paranoia. This was not misunderstanding. My son and his wife were actively plotting to steal my money and my freedom. That same week, my neighbor Linda stopped by for coffee. Linda was a widow herself, about my age, with kind eyes and a gentle way of speaking. We had become closer since Harold's death, bonding over our shared experience of loss. Linda mentioned almost as an afterthought that she had seen Derek and Brittany walking around my property the previous month. They had been taking photographs of the house, measuring the yard, pointing at various features. A man in a suit had joined them briefly, and Linda had overheard Brittany say something about the house fetching a good price. A real estate agent. They had brought a real estate agent to my home while I was at church. They were already planning to sell my house before my body was even cold. One final call confirmed my worst fears. I contacted my bank to check on my accounts. The manager told me that Derek had recently submitted a request to be added as a joint account holder, citing concerns about his elderly mother's ability to manage her finances. The bank had denied the request because it required my signature and personal verification. They had tried to gain access to my money directly. If the bank had approved that request, Derek could have drained my accounts at any time. I sat in my kitchen surrounded by evidence of betrayal. My son was not just ungrateful, he was dangerous, and I was done being his target. I did not sleep much that night, but it was not because of grief, it was because of planning. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Thompson again. I need to change my will, I told him. Completely. I want you to remove Derek from everything. Mr. Thompson did not argue. He simply asked when I could come in. That afternoon, I drove to his office in Burlington and sat across from him at his big oak desk, the same desk where Harold and I had signed our original wills so many years ago. I made my wishes clear. Derek would not receive a single cent. Not the house, not the savings, not the insurance, nothing. The house would be donated to a charity that helps elderly abuse victims. The savings would be divided between a scholarship fund in Harold's name, the hospital where I worked for 35 years, and our local church. A small portion would go to Linda, my faithful neighbor and friend. Mr. Thompson wrote everything down. He asked if I was sure if I wanted to think about it longer. I told him I had never been more sure of anything in my life. I signed the new will that day. 2 witnesses from his office added their signatures. It was done. Next, I went to the bank and opened a new account at a completely different institution. I transferred all my money into this new account with strict instructions that no one but me could access it under any circumstances. I also contacted my insurance company and changed the beneficiary from Derek to the Harold Foundation, the scholarship fund I had just established. Back at home, I gathered all the evidence. I saved the voice message to 3 different places, my email, a USB drive, and a copy I gave to Mr. Thompson for safekeeping. I wrote down everything I had discovered, dates, times, conversations, searches, with as much detail as I could remember. If this ever went to court, I would be ready. Then I planned my confrontation. I was not going to face Derek and Brittany alone. I needed witnesses, people who could support me and verify what happened. I called Linda and asked if she would be willing to attend a dinner at my house. She agreed without hesitation. I called Pastor Williams from my church, a man I had known for 20 years and trusted completely. He agreed as well. Mr. Thompson said he would clear his schedule to be there. I practiced what I would say. Every word was carefully chosen. I wrote it out, revised it, practiced it in front of the mirror. I wanted to be calm, composed, devastating. The night before the dinner, I stood in front of Harold's photograph in the bedroom. I told him what I was going to do. I asked for his strength, his guidance, his blessing, and I swear for just a moment I felt his hand on my shoulder. I was ready. They arrived at 6:00 sharp, Derek carrying a bottle of wine, Brittany holding a bouquet of flowers. Such perfect children, such caring family members. The sight of their false smiles made my stomach turn. They stepped inside and immediately noticed the others. Mr. Thompson stood by the fireplace in his gray suit. Pastor Williams sat in Harold's old armchair, his Bible resting on his knee. Linda occupied the corner of the sofa, her hands folded in her lap. Derek's smile flickered. Brittany's grip on the flowers tightened. "Mom?" Derek said, his voice uncertain, "You did not mention you were having other guests." I told them I wanted important people around me for this special evening. I told them to come in to sit down to make themselves comfortable. The meal was almost ready. Dinner was roast chicken with vegetables, Harold's favorite recipe. We ate in near silence. Brittany tried to make small talk about the weather, about her job, about their plans for the holidays. Her voice was too bright, too nervous. Derek barely touched his food. When the plates were cleared, I invited everyone into the living room. Derek asked if there was something I wanted to discuss. He tried to sound casual, but I could see the fear beginning to dawn in his eyes. I told them yes. I told them I had received something very interesting 2 weeks ago, something I wanted to share with everyone present. I placed my phone on the coffee table. My finger hovered over the play button. Derek went pale. Brittany grabbed his arm. I pressed play. His voice filled the room. Every cruel word, every contemptuous syllable, the useless old hag comment, the final nap joke, the Paris fantasy, and Brittany's laugh, that horrible, heartless laugh that echoed off the walls. When it ended, no one moved. Mr. Thompson shook his head slowly. Pastor Williams closed his eyes and murmured a prayer. Linda reached over and took my hand. Derek shot to his feet. His face was red, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He stammered that it was a misunderstanding, that he did not mean it, that I had taken it out of context. Brittany started crying, loud, theatrical sobs that fooled no one. She whimpered about how stressed they had been, how she never meant any of it, how much they loved me. I raised my hand and they both fell silent. I spoke calmly, clearly, without raising my voice. I told them I knew everything. The calls to Mr. Thompson about my competency, the inquiries at Sunny Pines about forcing me into care, the internet searches on my computer about declaring elderly parents incompetent, the real estate agent they brought to my property, the attempt to add Derek to my bank accounts. With each revelation, Derek's face grew paler. Brittany's tears dried up, replaced by something harder, uglier. I told them I had given them everything. I had paid for their wedding, their house, their car. I had sent them money every holiday, every birthday, every time they asked. I had sacrificed and saved and given until I had nothing left to give but my own life. And now I knew that was exactly what they were waiting for. I told Derek he used to be my pride. He used to be the reason I got up in the morning. But the man standing before me was not my son. My son died somewhere along the way, replaced by someone I did not recognize. I told them I had changed my will. They would receive nothing. Not the house, not the savings, not the insurance. Everything would go to people and causes that deserved it. People who actually cared about more than money. Derek lunged forward, his voice rising to a shout. He called me crazy. He said I could not do this, that he was my only child, that it was his birthright. Brittany dropped all pretense. She screamed that I was just a bitter old woman, that the money was theirs, that I owed them for all the years they had put up with me. Mr. Thompson stepped forward and told them Mrs. Peggy's assets were hers to distribute as she saw fit. The will was legal, properly witnessed, and uncontestable. They had no claim to anything. Pastor Williams added that they should be ashamed. He said he would pray for their souls because they clearly needed it. I pointed to the door. I told them to leave. I told them to never come back. I told them they were no longer welcome in this house, in my life, in my heart. Derek tried one more time. He dropped to his knees, grabbing at my hands, calling me Mom in that little boy voice he used when he wanted something. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the child I had raised. But then I remembered the voice message and the image shattered. I pulled my hands away. I told him goodbye. They left. Brittany slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. I heard their car start tires squealing as they sped down the driveway. Then there was silence. Linda hugged me tight. Pastor Williams blessed the house. Mr. Thompson poured me a glass of wine and told me I had done the right thing. Later that night, long after everyone had gone home, I sat alone on the porch. The stars were out, thousands of them scattered across the sky like spilled diamonds. I thought about Harold. I thought about Derek. I thought about everything I had lost and everything I had gained. And for the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. The days after the confrontation were harder than I expected. Cutting off your child, even a child who has betrayed you, leaves a wound that does not heal quickly. I found myself wandering into Derek's old bedroom, touching the trophies on his shelf, the posters on his walls, the bedspread I had washed 100 times. I would stand there for hours, lost in memories of birthday parties and bedtime stories, and the sound of his laughter echoing through the house. Some nights I cried. I cried for the son I had lost, for the relationship that might have been, for the years I had wasted on someone who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with a pulse. But I did not regret my decision, not for a single moment. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I started volunteering at the hospital where I had worked for so many years. The nurses remembered me, welcomed me back with hugs and smiles. I helped with patient intake, held hands with frightened elderly folks, read stories to children in the pediatric ward. It felt good to be useful again, to have purpose. I joined a support group at church for seniors who had experienced family estrangement. There were more of us than I expected. We shared our stories, our pain, our strategies for moving forward. I learned I was not alone. Linda and I grew closer. We started walking together every morning 2 miles around the neighborhood, talking about everything and nothing. She invited me to join her book club, and suddenly I had a social calendar fuller than it had been in years. The Harold Foundation held its first scholarship ceremony 6 months after I established it. 3 young students received funding for their education. Bright kids from working-class families who reminded me of Derek as he once was. I handed them their checks and told them to make something of themselves. They thanked me, with tears in their eyes. I traveled a little. Not to Paris, never to Paris, but to places Harold and I had always wanted to see. I took a bus tour to Maine and watched the sunrise over Acadia National Park. I visited my sister in California for the first time in 20 years. I took a cruise to Alaska and stood on the deck as glaciers calved into the sea. I learned to be alone without being lonely. I learned that family is not always blood. I learned that the best revenge is living well. About a year after the confrontation, I heard through the grapevine that Derek and Brittany had divorced. Without the promise of my money to bind them together, their relationship had collapsed. I was not surprised. Greed is a poor foundation for love. A month after that, a letter arrived, Derek's handwriting on the envelope return address, from a small apartment in a part of Boston I did not recognize. I held it for 3 days before opening it. He wrote that he was sorry. He wrote that he had made terrible mistakes. He wrote that losing me had forced him to look at himself. Really look, and he was ashamed of what he saw. He was in therapy now, trying to become a better person. He did not ask for money. He did not ask to be put back in the will. He only asked if we could talk someday when I was ready. I read the letter 3 times. I thought about it for weeks. In the end, I decided I was not ready. Maybe I never would be. The wound was too deep, the betrayal too complete. Forgiving him in my heart was one thing. Letting him back into my life was another. I wrote back a short note. I told him I received his letter. I told him I hoped he found peace. I told him I could not see him right now. Maybe someday, but not today. That was 2 years ago. I am 70 now, still living in the house Harold built, still drinking tea on the porch every afternoon. My health is good. My friends are many. My heart is full. I do not hate Derek. Hate takes too much energy, and I have better things to do with my time. I feel sad for him. Sad for the life he could have had if he had chosen differently. But his choices are not my responsibility. My only responsibility is to myself. If there is a lesson in all of this, it is this. Love does not mean sacrificing your dignity. Generosity does not mean accepting exploitation. Family is about respect and care, not obligation and inheritance. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who do not deserve you. I am Peggy. I am 68 years old. I was betrayed by my own son, and I survived. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt used by someone you love? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who took advantage of your kindness? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like to help others find it. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories about resilience, survival, and finding strength in the darkest moments. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share this video with them. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brings you comfort if you are going through something similar, and I hope it reminds you that you are worthy of respect and love. Take care of yourselves out there. Protect your hearts. And remember, it is never too late to take back your power. Until next time.